Every fantasy football season, one running back completely flips fantasy football on his head. Not just a top 5 guy, we're talking an overall RB1, a league winner. The reason your buddy won't stop trash talking you in October, but if you want the edge this year, you're going to need to know who actually has a real shot. So today I'm breaking down the top 12 running backs being drafted in 2025 and ranking their chances of finishing as the RB1. At the end, I'll give you my pick for who I think does it this season. Now, a little bit of context and criteria before we get into these overall rankings. Looking at the last 5 years of data who finished as the RB1, there's a few different patterns, few different averages that have shown up for the overall RB1. Number one, they have averaged over 330 touches in that given season. So they're an absolute workhorse bell cow that is getting the ball a ton. Number two, they've put up almost 2,000 scrimmage yards. That means they had an incredible season on the ground and receiving. And number three, they scored right around 19 total touchdowns. So this is a pretty simple formula. We would call this an absolute workhorse, massive workload, monster production, and a ton of end zone and red zone trips. So on top of that, though, the extra kind of layer of this is that player has been drafted right around pick 1-6. So in the first round, pick 6 over the last 5 years. So you're having to take that player pretty early in your draft. So we're looking at early round workhorse backs with real league winning ceilings. Now, let's kind of dive into the players that are currently kind of going off the board as the top 12 running backs and kind of giving you my rankings on where I think that player potentially has the chance to finish as the overall RB1. Now, let's start it off with player number 1. It is going to be Bijan Robinson for the Atlanta Falcons, who are right now on the 4for4 composite ADP, which if you want to use the 4for4, any of the tools that are awesome, like the rankings, the research, even DFS betting, use code YouTube. It actually gets you 25% off of the 4for4 plans. I use these plans each and every year, not only when I'm making my bets, not only when I'm setting my rosters, but also just to get some more in-depth analysis. 92% of people that use the 4for4 website make their fantasy football playoffs. So 100% go check that out over on the website. But Bijan Robinson is going off the board composite ADP-wise as the RB1 overall. And when we're looking at last season, Bijan Robinson finished in full PPR as the RB3 on a points per game basis with 20.1. Now, what is going into this year 3 campaign for Bijan Robinson? Not only has he got that perfect age where we like to see kind of going into year 3, still under that age apex of 26, but we see Michael Penix Jr. being the starter there. We're seeing, hopefully Drake London taking that next step, becoming the alpha level wide receiver we know he can. Maybe there's a resurgence of Kyle Pitts, but I think we're all kind of acknowledging that Bijan Robinson is going to carry this offense as far as it's willing to go. Now, here at 4for4, we have absolutely amazing rankings on the site with John Paulson, but for the last few years, I've been using Mike Clay's projections when it comes to running backs. And specifically, if we take a look at Bijan Robinson, Mike Clay actually has him projected for 336 fantasy points with 303 carries, 79 targets, 62 receptions. So like we said, we want that above 300 touch threshold, which he's absolutely giving it to Bijan Robinson here. And he has him scoring 12 rushing touchdowns and 2 receiving touchdowns for 14 overall touchdowns. Now, like we said, when you're looking at projections, it's hard to... Mike Clay has also talked about, he always kind of sets it as like an 80% threshold of what that projection would look like. So, of course, is that going to be, when we're talking, 14 touchdowns, is that in that 19 threshold? He's got the carries, he's got the volume, the 100% the workhorse, but when we're looking at actually rushing yards, he's given him 1422, and then receiving yards at 490. So we're right in that 1900 overall yards, so just like a tad bit below that. But a lot of people are drafting Bijan Robinson because it's the assumption that he's going to be able to achieve, and if that's an 80% outcome, then all of a sudden we could be talking about Bijan Robinson absolutely going up higher. So Bijan Robinson for me is going to slide into the overall tier of a strong candidate for the RB1 overall title. I think clearly people are drafting him number 1. Clearly he's going to be getting a ton of volume. So put him here in the strong category. Now, next guy we're going to be talking about is going to be Saquon Barkley, who is kind of coming back for his throne. He's coming back for the RB1 overall finish that he had last season on a points per game basis, where he put up 22.2 fantasy points per game. absolutely electric. We see him get added to that Philadelphia Eagles team where we had a great offensive line. You had Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, the whole gang, and we saw him absolutely dominate. Now, going into kind of this next year, the big issue with Saquon Barkley is how many touches that he had last season. Is he going to be able to replicate that? We haven't seen an RB1 like back-to-back finish, and I think it's almost been like 15 to 20 years. I should get my data correct, but it's been almost 15 to 20 years since we've had an absolute back-to-back finish like that. So when I'm looking at Saquon Barkley, he's currently right now coming off the board compositely, so I think that's why people are kind of pushing up Bijan Robinson, because a lot of people have them very close. But Mike Clay has Saquon Barkley projected for 332 carries, so almost 30 more carries than he had Bijan Robinson projected for, and then had him for 48 receptions overall. Big thing is kind of looking at the rushing touchdowns, 11 and 2. So last year, Saquon Barkley had an absolutely killer year when it comes to the overall touchdowns. And so kind of projecting him to come back just a little bit more in 2025, because like we said, last year, absolutely insane, had 13 total touchdowns rushing. And then if you look at overall receiving, had 2. So 15 touchdowns, but that absolute insane yardage, getting over, getting close to that 2,000 yard mark. Saquon Barkley was incredible last year. So I have him as a very strong candidate to also be an RB1. So I think those are kind of the top 2 choices that a lot of people are going to be making as that overall RB1, as a strong contention to be the RB1. Moving on to Jahmyr Gibbs. He's kind of the third running back flying off the board on composite ADP. Right now, like I said, he's the RB3. He's the overall player 4 over on the 4for4 composite. And when we look at what we saw from Jahmyr Gibbs last season, we saw Sonic and Knuckles doing what they do best. But Jahmyr Gibbs won a lot of people their championships, especially when we saw David Montgomery go down. Like in week 7, we saw 32 fantasy points out of Jahmyr Gibbs in full PPR, and especially won a lot of people their leagues in weeks 15, week 17, or week 16 and week 17, and where he put up 21.3 fantasy points per game. Now, if we could see Jahmyr Gibbs get a 75% snap share, I think we could be talking about Jahmyr Gibbs to the absolute moon, because we still have David Montgomery kind of nipping at his heels, the Sonic Knuckles, the trade-off that you have with Jahmyr Gibbs. But when we look at kind of Mike Play's projections for Jahmyr Gibbs, he actually has him as his RB4 overall, hovering right around 317 fantasy points, with 235 carries, 1,100 yards, 11 rushing touchdowns, 82 targets, 60 receptions, 568 receiving yards, and 3 total touchdowns. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't have him as a strong candidate. I actually have him as a good candidate for the overall RB1. I think it would take a big injury for David Montgomery, for Jahmyr Gibbs to kind of get the full workload and then stay healthy through the whole season. You still have the question marks around what's happening with Ben Johnson, what's happening with his offense, of course, with no Ben Johnson. So Jahmyr Gibbs, he's going to be somebody that I put in the good category. I think it's a valid shot, especially if you're missing out on any of the other guys. Okay, next guy, it is going to be Christian McCaffrey, and Christian McCaffrey sliding on the board as overall RB4. I have him in this kind of same tier. I still have him in the good chance to be the overall RB1. And Christian McCaffrey, the 49ers don't have a lot that they're going to be battling, but Mike Clay has Christian McCaffrey as his RB3 right now, has him projected for 322 fantasy points, 261 carries, and when it looks at receptions, 72 receptions. So falling right in line with that 300 overall touches. When it comes to touchdowns, he has him sliding in with 12. So I think this offense is going to have to run through Christian McCaffrey. We're expecting a lot from like a guy like a Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, as Brandon Ayuk's recovering from that injury. And then you got George Kittle, of course, to be throwing the ball to Brock Purdy. But I think this offense is probably going to go as far as Christian McCaffrey is going to go. Now, we saw the risk that happens with Christian McCaffrey at this age with his injury risk last season let a lot of fantasy football managers down. But we have continued to see that when Christian McCaffrey absolutely cooks, he is absolutely cooking, and he has overall RB1 in his full potential. But I just kind of put him here in that strong category. Now, next guy in the overall rankings, it is going to be Ashton Jeanty, rookie level running back, for the Raiders, going off the board as overall player 11, RB5, and getting drafted a top 6 pick in a Chip Kelly, Pete Carroll offense means a lot. It's a tough pill to swallow because it almost reminds me a little bit of Bijan Robinson a few years ago, where I'll be completely honest, back in 2023, I was hyping up Bijan Robinson and CMC as equal, and I should not have been doing that because it was clearly CMC in 2023 with the 49ers. But I think the same thing is happening where we're pushing up Ashton Jeanty, but he's still like discounted compared to where Bijan Robinson was going his rookie season. But this offensive line looks absolutely atrocious. I mean, you do have Geno Smith, you do have Brock Bowers, you do have some nice weapons in this Raiders offense. But to kind of just assume and put the projection on Ashton Jeanty to be the overall RB1, I feel like is a little bit counterintuitive. 298 fantasy points is what Mike Clay has him projected for in the 17 games. 273 carries. When it comes to receptions, he has him at 63. So he does have him hitting that 300 overall touch threshold. When it comes to yards, he does have him sliding right around 1,600 yards. And then touchdown-wise, only at 10. So I think Ashton Jeanty definitely has potentially the touch potential to get us to the promised land, to get us to that overall RB1 overall finish. But we haven't seen a rookie-level running back absolutely light the world on fire like that through a whole season, pretty much since Zeke in 2016. So just want to kind of put that into perspective that it's a little bit of a risky bet with Ashton Jeanty, but based on kind of where he's going, I still would have him sliding in here to the overall good tier. Next guy in this tier, it is going to be us talking about Derrick Henry, the absolute GOAT, Mr. Derrick Henry, who nobody can stop him. 19.8 fantasy points last year was a really good year. My biggest worry with Derrick Henry going forward is just father time's going to catch up at some point. Once we see these running backs get past that like 30-year-old age packs, it's just kind of a ticking time bomb in my personal opinion. Now, I am still going to be drafting Derrick Henry in the early part of the second round if he falls. I think he's an absolutely great bet playing next to Lamar Jackson in an offense that is going to be scoring plenty of touchdowns. The touchdown upside alone is enough on top of the overall rushing upside. Like I said, though, I think I'd be rather taking a bet on some of these other guys a little bit ahead of Derrick Henry to overall finish as the RB1. But since he's sliding in here as the RB6 for Baltimore, have him kind of here still in the good tier. Now, one more player to add to this overall good tier for potential RB overall, it's going to be Achane for the Miami Dolphins, and he's sliding in as the RB7 over on the 4-for-4 composite. Mike Clay currently has him projected as his overall RB5 with 306 fantasy points per game. Now, he's got 218 carries, 999 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, 89 targets for 74 receptions, 560 yards. So he doesn't necessarily hit the thresholds when it comes to yards, but touchdown upside's a little bit higher. So for me, I just think Devon's going to get more work than this, in my personal humble opinion. I know it's hard to, especially when year one, we saw amazing efficiency, but we didn't see a healthy season. Last year, we saw more of a healthy season, but we saw the splits with Tua Tagovailoa and then Achane. If you take a look at this, it's like night and day. We would have probably been talking about Achane as a top 5 back if Tua Tagovailoa played the whole season. I'm just taking a shot on Achane, and I still have him here in this tier. This is the last guy kind of in this good tier, and I think you can make an equal bet that Achane should be at the top of this tier. I think you should be talking about Christian McCaffrey, Achane, kind of in the same overall circumstance. So I think this is a pretty good tier here. But then kind of moving into the next tier of, I would call this average, I have 3 running backs. I have Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving. Now, all these guys, you can make the case volume-wise for Jonathan Taylor and Josh Jacobs, both of them in Mike Clay's projections. We have Jonathan Taylor sliding in as the RB7. We have Bucky Irving sliding in as the RB8. Kind of right along track, a few spots back from the 4-for-4 composite ADP. But I just think a lot has to go right for both of them. We saw Daniel Jones get announced the starter for the Indianapolis Colts, which could be beneficial for Jonathan Taylor. But how many scoring opportunities are the Colts offense actually going to have this year? Josh Jacobs absolutely kind of put the Green Bay Packers' whole offense on his back last season, but he put up 17.2 fantasy points per game with that overall volume, which I'm not trying to say is terrible by any stretch of the imagination. But when you have almost 301 rushing attempts, and that's kind of the the ceiling that we saw, it's hard for me to push Josh Jacobs up any higher in my overall ranking. So both these guys are going to kind of be put in the average tier. And then the last player to be kind of put here in the average tier overall rankings is going to be Kyren Williams. And Kyren Williams got that extension from the Rams. We saw 2 years ago, he was the absolute waiver wire darling. Kyren Williams has been nothing but a man of consistency, a man of good, 17, 18, 19 fantasy points per game. My issue is, can we see him get back to that prime Kyren Williams, especially with, I know Matthew Stafford, there's just the rumors of where is he standing overall. I just want to kind of be a little bit more cautious with Kyren, and so that's kind of why I will put him here in the average. Now, when we get to like the below average chance, we're talking kind of about some more guys. Number one is going to be Chase Brown. I am a big Chase Brown believer. I like his overall ranking, but I think finishing as the overall RB1 in points per game is a little bit hard, especially considering the fact that I just believe that this Cincinnati Bengals offense is going to have to score a lot of points. And by me saying that, in hindsight, you could say, hey, I think we're going to be looking at a major renaissance for a guy like a Chase Brown. My issue is I think they're going to be scoring a lot of points throwing the ball. I don't think they're going to be running the ball a ton. So Mike Clay has Chase Brown projected for only 256 carries, which I just think is too low for me to really be pushing Chase Brown up the board and really making the case for him to be the overall RB1. Now, some other guys, like last second guys to kind of throw in here, we're going to talk about like a Breece Hall, and I would say like a James Cook, maybe an Amara and Hampton. Like those three guys I would still have in this below average tier. Amara and Hampton, we're going to have to see what Najee Harris and his splits are looking like. Breece Hall, there's a chance that Breece Hall's in an absolute three-way committee with the New York Jets. Justin Fields, how efficient is he going to be as a whole offense? And then the last and final guy that we will talk about here is James Cook. Of course, James Cook finished as the RB14 in fantasy points per game last season, and he had 18 total touchdowns. So even if his touchdowns come down a little bit, I just don't think there's any way that a guy like James Cook can hit that overall RB1 threshold. So if you were to then nail me down and say, Caleb, who are you stamping? Who are you putting as your RB1 overall for 2025 fantasy football? Listen, I think the top two guys, I think it's exciting. I think the easy answer would probably say Bijan Robinson, but I think anybody would say Bijan Robinson just kind of based on the stats that we absolutely laid out. But I think my dark horse for 2025 fantasy football to finish as the RB1 overall, it is going to be Achane. I'm picking a guy that potentially you could get at the back end of the first, early part of the second, that has every shot to be the game breaker that we know a Jahmyr Gibbs to be, that we know a Bijan Robinson to be. I think it's just a little bit cheaper. So give me Achane. I'm putting all my chips in. I'm putting all my gold at the end of the rainbow. You come back at the end of the season and let me know, did Achane absolutely help you win a fantasy football championship in 2025? Because I'll be drafting plenty of Achane. That's my guy that I'm believing has RB1 overall upside. If you like fantasy football, hit that like and subscribe button as we are on the way to 1,000 subscribers here on the 4for4 YouTube channel. Appreciate you guys so much, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.